Hello and welcome back to the Cardiff Central podcast, where the URC is back with a bang, but unfortunately, the bang is Cardiff crashing down to earth. We'll try and pick through the Bulls game, assess what it means for the next few weeks, and cover the latest news from the Arms Park. The Rags are on the march, and the Sharks are up next. Joining me on the podcast this week, we've got Steve Coombs. Steve, how are you?
Not bad at all, thanks, Dan.
Good stuff. And Tony Esposti. Tony, how are you?
Yeah, I'm all right.
Good stuff. Right. Unfortunately, we do have to start with the on-field action from last weekend.
It
Bulls
was no
40,
rugby.
Cardiff 7. It was an early Harry Millard try after Ben Thomas pounced on a loose ball. And then it was just all Bulls pretty much for the rest of the game. An Alan Lawrence yellow card didn't help, but relentless from the host, who scored five first half tries to make it 33-7 at the break, and then somewhat declared in the second half to only win that one 7-0. As you might expect, not many three-word thoughts, because I think most people either just didn't bother or turned it off quite early on. But Lloyd said one to forget. Rob went with nothing went well. Mark said all very predictable. Paul went with dear oh dear. Andrew said don't take threes, which is somewhat against our messaging all through the season. But there was that one penalty that was missed when we were down to 14 men. And then Sid just finished on a slightly more positive note, though, of never gave up, which I mean, at the bare minimum, at least that's something to cling on to. Steve, yeah, I think even before half time, you were bemoaning the fact that you were coming on the podcast this week with this game in the background. Have you thought of any sentient thoughts since then?
No, I mean, I wouldn't be too down about it. I mean, to be honest, when I saw our team announced, I thought, oh, hello, we might, get something out of this because it had a bit of continuity from the Leinster game, which was a good showing. But then I saw the Bulls team, and I thought, oh no, they're taking this one quite seriously. It's going to be at altitude, and I think another factor is we've obviously had quite long breaks with the Six Nations on, but the South African teams have kept playing. Like the Bulls had a game the previous week, a derby game the previous week, so they were coming into it. They were coming into it with a bit of a run up. Um, I wouldn't be too down about it because I think there were a couple of good things about the performance, which is a, kind of a silly thing to say after a bit of a beating. But I thought there were a couple of good individual displays. Dan Thomas was really good. Good to see Faletau back. I thought Josh McNally. I mean, he's reliable, obviously, but he was also carrying a bit more than we tend to see, I think. So yeah, also quite good to see Alice Bevan back. I thought he was pretty good in his substitute appearance. So yeah, let's not be too downhearted, shall we?
Tony, your thoughts?
Yeah, pretty much the same thing. I have caught up with the game after because I left about half an hour into it um, to go to my own kids' rugby training where I was coaching, and the group chat was an interesting read, especially catching up on it straight after training. It was yeah, it like the most disappointing thing about it was on the podcast last week we were talking, well, let's just try and pick up a bonus point. And then, like Steve said, we've picked a really strong side. Is in hindsight, was that the right thing to do? Especially with people like McNally who were flogging at altitude again. But I suppose this needs must. We were quickly talking beforehand that there's not a lot of second rows flying about at the moment, and it is what it is. On to this week, I guess, is just draw a line under it and go.
We should do
Yeah.
some sort of Patreon thing where people have access to everything we talk about before the podcast actually starts. We've done half the news already.
I think we would get into a lot of trouble for that, though. That's the
Yeah,
problem.
there's a reason it's not recorded. I only switched on at half time on Friday because 5 o'clock is terrible kickoff time, and And the first thing I was struck by was there was a scrum quite early in the second half, and they sort of zoomed in on the respective packs. And our lads look like they've sort of like done an Iron Man up the mountain to get to a to altitude level, and they're dripping and they look like sucking in air. And then it went to the Bulls lads who sort of look like they'd just come out of the spa on the other side, and were quite relaxed about the whole thing. I mean, that altitude is no joke up there, but we certainly didn't help ourselves at all, did we? Like handling errors galore. Some of the tries were very soft. One or two were a bit lucky. I mean, there's no way that lad means to kick, punt the ball across the field off the floor into the hands of
I mean,
the.
he'd claim it, obviously.
I was listening to that one on Radio Wales, and the incredulity of of them describing it was just like they were just like we don't even know quite what's happened there and how he's got it all the way over there with there's no way he meant it. Yeah.
I mean, if he did it unbelievable vision, he should be probably playing in the Premier League this weekend instead. But yeah, I think that the players will still be disappointed. There was a theme in some of the other 3 Word Thoughts where Ryan said handling errors galore. Rob went with basics, basics, basics. Steve said sloppy hands costly. Stephen said handling errors kill. Steve, I wonder how much can you blame the conditions in that scenario versus also sort of saying, yeah, there was a couple which were relatively sort of simple, and a lot of the errors seem to happen as well on like turnover ball when we thought we might have a chance to attack, and it just didn't quite go well.
Yeah, I think one frustrating thing about it, and even the South African commentators were picking up on it, was we were actually getting a couple of line breaks, and we were getting a bit of joy, and it did look like we'd spent the gap since the last game doing work on the attack, and there was actually some positive signs there. And then we cock it up with a forward pass or a knock on, and I think the trend actually started quite early in the game as well. I mean, I remember early on when we were leading, there was a turnover, and then I think Dan Thomas threw a pass which went completely wayward, and so I'm not sure like to what extent it's to do with the altitude just getting to players really quickly and getting into their legs and their arms, or just the fact that there has been a bit of a break. And it's a strange thing with the structure of the URC season where it must, for a player, it must feel like you have about half a dozen different pre-seasons scattered throughout the year because of all the gaps. So yeah, I'm not sure to what extent we can blame the altitude versus the time off. But yeah, the handling was really frustrating because it was mixed. It was actually some really nice play.
Yeah, there was one from Reece Barrett as well. I seem to recall first half where Dan Thomas comes around the side of the breakdown, flicks it back to Barrett, who just I'm not sure what he was actually intending to do with his pass, but it didn't go to any of the it seemed like there were so many options. He chose none of them and just threw it to the ground instead, essentially. But yeah, it was very frustrating. Tony?
We were pretty aggressive at the breakdown, I thought, especially in the first chunk of the game, which we've sort of taken out of our game over the last year or so, 2 years, where before we used to just be a team of flankers. Um, that was an F, not a W. Um, Now we're much more selective about when we attack that, and maybe we don't get as many breakdown turnovers as we probably could have. But on Friday, it felt like we were trying to get at that breakdown a lot quicker and a lot earlier in games than we have been doing lately, which is really promising. Like if we can bring that back into our game style, because I want to see Sheedy and Mulder, Ben Thomas, and the guys outside them run in at broken defenses.
The cynic in me would say whether it's less effort to just fall into the breakdown than then reform up on the line and get off it again at altitude. But yeah, it was certainly one of our higher turnover games. Results from South Africa generally on the weekend, Steve. The other games, Lions 54, Edinburgh 17. I think Lions had a man off for quite a lot of that game as well. Sharks 45, Munster nil. Quite remarkable score, that one. Only 1 point off Munster's record loss, which is
Um,
held by us, as it turns out.
I wouldn't want to be the team that plays the Sharks next.
Well, yeah, precisely. And then, remarkably, the most positive result from South Africa on the weekend was Stormers 29, Dragons 21, but still a bonus point win for the Stormers. It's another game for us in Pretoria where we've struggled as well. At what point do we sort of say it's not really worth it for us to really take the 2 weeks seriously and just start like half binning it off?
I mean, no, you do want to say like we shouldn't take it seriously. It's obviously a big challenge going there, isn't it? And I think what that little group of results show, probably especially the Sharks one, which is a real shock, is that they've benefited from basically having that continuity during the Six Nations, I think that's a big factor. But yeah, I mean, looking at it, it's never not daunting, is it? Even though, I mean, we have seen the South African sides be remarkably inconsistent at times, but yeah, in the aftermath of Friday's game, it feels like quite a long way to go to get a bit of a hiding.
It does seem it's also like it's very reliant on the fixture list, I think. Like you have
Yeah.
to get lucky about when you go to South Africa. I'm not sure
Yeah.
there's an ideal spot, but there's certainly some like this 2 weeks. Coming off the back of November as well. Sometimes there's two league fixtures in there if you end up going right after the autumn internationals, where it's just like it's a bad spot to go in those couple of
You,
weeks.
you want them early in the season when they don't have their South Africans. So I think the Ospreys had their away games right at the start of the season and
Mm.
put out good performances out there. Um, so maybe that's the better time window because you don't have to play their internationals as much because they're all coming off the championship.
Yeah, we'll put a word in, but I don't think the fixture
I
producers like
mean,
us very much, judging
no,
by our kickoff times and stuff every year. Tony, we spoke a bit on the pod last week about sort of what the kicking strategy might be, whether trying to batter it long and ask them to run from deep or be a bit more competitive. What was the kicking strategy that they ended up producing? Because I'm not really too sure.
I think half the team got the message that it should be kick it long, and then the other half got the message that it should be compete. So it completely nobody knew exactly what they were meant to be doing. And it became very, very muddled. And then from there, like that just blows you out the window, right? Like you just can't get off the back of it. Um, yeah. It's just a disappointing thing to be thinking of, especially with how positive this season has been so far. I just draw a line under it and go.
Yeah.
Well, sorry, go on, Steve.
No, I was just going to say I agree with Tony. We should never ever talk about that game ever again, and we don't have to.
No.
Well, I did ask that. That was my question on social media to people this week was basically, is there any positives worth taking, or is it just draw a line under it? Steve, another Steve, responded, yes, there were positives, breakdown play, defense, forced errors, high ball work of the back three, which I thought receptive wise, we were quite good actually.
Yeah.
Beetham and Grady in particular had a lot of success in the air. But basically, the negatives massively outweighed all of them, which I think sums it up quite nicely. That if there were a couple of things to cling on to, I mean, they're probably not that worth clinging on to because we've done quite a lot of them most of the season. Steve, one of the comments that I just saw a couple of times on social media during the game on Friday was around Callum Sheedy and a couple of people expressing disappointment in some of his kicking and decision making early on. I think it's always a position that gets talked about fly half in any rugby team, isn't it? It's just one of the main ones. I had a look, and since he joined us the summer before last, he started 31 of the 38 Cardiff games that have been played. So he has been, the starting 10 without question. Is there any sort of debate in your mind about whether it's time to just change it up and see if Johan Lloyd gets to go and whether that puts lights of fire under Sheedy? That if you feel he has been performing under par at all?
I don't feel Sheedy has been performing under par.
Oh,
I
You've
think
broken
he's
up
had a
there,
really
Steve. I
strong
think
season.
he's
I think
frozen.
a case of sorry, did I drop out then?
yeah. Sorry. Start. Yeah. Just so you don't think he has been under par?
No, I don't think he has been under par. I think on Friday night he's been playing behind something of a beaten pack, and the tens are always going to struggle a little bit in those circumstances. I think he is our best 10. And maybe we'll get onto this later, but I wouldn't mind seeing Harry Wilde get a few more chances. I thought he was excellent against Stade Francais in the one appearance he's had so far this season. And I think I really want to see more of him because I just get the feeling there's a really good player in there. Johan Lloyd, I mean, whenever I see him play, I think like this guy is obviously so talented. He's got such good feet. He's got such a good kicking game. Is he a 10? And I think that's always been the dilemma through his career. But no, I'm very happy with Sheedy as our first choice 10.
Um,
Yeah, I don't think it's like an overwhelming position. I just saw a few comments about it. Sorry, Tony, you were going to say.
no, I was going to ask, did Sheedy get called up for the Six Nations?
No, he didn't in the end.
No. All right, it just comes back to the fact he hasn't played rugby again. I was just wondering whether he'd just spent 6 weeks holding a tackle bag, but obviously he hasn't. It's just,
No, I think there was
but
some
like you said,
chat.
it's yeah. There's a going backwards behind a pack is just difficult.
I think there was some chat about whether he might come in when Costello got the knock, but they
It was.
uh,
That's what it was.
never actually called him up in the end. Yeah, I have to say I don't like. I still really like a lot of what Sheedy offers, and there's one kick pass in particular from Millard where if the ball bounces properly, then it sits up nicely and he goes in to score. There's a couple of nice other touches in there, but yeah, it just wasn't really a day for 10. So it was Andre Pollard at 10 for the Bulls, obviously World Cup winner, one of the best around. I don't think we even saw a massive amount of him particularly either. It was just one of those games where it was more pack and then back three oriented rather than what your midfield was up to particularly. Tony, my only last point to make was it wasn't even a question really, just a statement of that Faletau lad looks quite good to come off the bench.
Yeah, yeah. He might be all right. I mean, give him a couple of years to develop, and he might do some things. Um, yeah, he just looks like Faletau, doesn't he? Like it's amazing that he can go from playing no rugby to being sublime for 4 weeks before picking up a niggle and having another 3 months off. So let's just hope that he can stay fit through the next game because I think if we've got him from the start next week, then or Friday, then the whole pack becomes much better because he's good off a pack going backwards, which allows the 9 and 10 to get on the front foot a lot more. Just helps everything just be a bit more cohesive.
Yeah, I wonder if he's actually getting injured on purpose now, so that we keep having to talk about how good he is when he comes back every time, and it doesn't affect him. Fingers crossed, we'll see more of him than we don't over the next 2 months,
Yeah.
certainly. Any more on the Bulls game, or can we consign it to the history books and
No, we
move
can move on now, I think.
Can move on.
on? Good stuff. Right, into the news then. Two pieces of good news last week as contract renewals started to filter out as the Six Nations gets out of the way. Cardiff announced that young stars Tom Bowen and Stefan Manuel have both signed new long-term deals at the club. Particularly good to see Bowen being tied down as there was that link to La Rochelle at one point, so that's positive news. And then in other contract news, which at the time of recording hasn't quite been announced yet, but will be by the time you're hearing this, Alex Mann has signed a new contract as well. Obviously, fresh off the back of an impressive Six Nations campaign, he's going to remain at the club. Steve, as our Aberdare correspondent, two Aberdare lads signing new contracts there. But yeah, good to see these guys signing on for more, even in the circumstances of West Rugby at the moment.
It's great to see. I mean, I think Alex Mann really put a marker down in the Six Nations. I think he's not just like the guy who's playing blindside for Wales this week in the eyes of the wider rugby world. He's now like a serious contender. I noticed there was at least one point in the Six Nations where there was a French newspaper putting me in their team of the week, and the French know a back row forward when they see one. I think he's going to be a 50 plus caps player for Wales. I mean, I'm massively biased, obviously, as he's an Aberdare-born player who plays for Cardiff. But no, I think he's going to be one of those guys. Tom Bowen, Yeah, I mean, I didn't really know what to make of that La Rochelle link. I mean, like agents putting stuff out there and that. But I don't think there's probably no serious risk of him leaving. I think, he's developing very well, so it'd seem a bit foolish to move on at this stage. And
Is he
also,
allowed to leave the country without parental consent yet? So would that have been a problem?
let's just say no, he's not allowed to leave the country. Parental consent, just on the off chance. And yes, Stefan Manuel. I mean, those are two players you can base the Cardiff backline around for, the foreseeable future. Two real proper talents.
Totally, totally. I'm convinced that Emmanuel's pushing Ben Thomas for that number 12 shirt by at least halfway through the season next year. And that's nothing on Thomas. That's just how good Steph is and can be. Um, yeah. I mentioned before, I do wonder whether we're announcing the Alex Mann deal before the Sharks game, but just to rile up Etsterbeth, who will be sat on the sidelines watching because of the ban from that. But who knows?
Extra good
Do
if
we
we've
think
flown him
Mike's
out.
Yeah. Do we think Man's? Do we think Mike's that big of a troll?
uh, News will come out before the club are going to announce the season memberships on Wednesday for the 150th season. I've had a little look at the video they're going to announce it with. It's very good, and so please do tune in on socials for that because yeah, you're going to want to watch it a lot, I think. Elsewhere, Cornel Van Zyl in his press conference last week revealed that talks on his future seem to be progressing quite well, which is positive. So hopefully we'll get some news on that soon. He also dropped in that basically, I think he said, I'm not sure the exact words, but along the lines of everybody that they want to retain has been retained, which is I don't know if that's ever happened in the professional history of Cardiff Rugby Club. There's always been somebody who's headed out the door. But yeah, it looks like the squad is taking decent shape next season, and recruitment wise, I think remains a question mark over how much they can get done and what the sort of certainty levels are around that. But if we keep what we've got, at least, then the squad will naturally improve because the likes of Bowen and Emmanuel and Mann and others are just going to get better. They're not going to get worse as they get into their careers. So that's all good. And then a piece of off-field news. I'm not sure if it's did Welsh Rugby Union officially announce this or Wales Online did? I'm not too sure, but it's come out anyway that the exclusivity window for Y11 Sport and Media to buy Cardiff Rugby has been extended by a period of 30 days. It now takes them up to Wednesday, the 22nd of April. Tony, I don't know, any strong feelings on this or what the next few weeks might look like?
No, my only thought when I first saw it was, is this so the WRU can stop Y11 pulling out from a deal? Because they seem to be as enthusiastic to pull out as some porn stars. Um, but yeah, but the likelihood is it's more around Swansea Council, and so the WRU don't have to get into a bum fight with them over things. It's just a mess after mess after mess. But yeah, you do wonder whether Martin Ryan is looking at it and going, is there still an opportunity? But who knows whether they've even moved on to something else now.
Steve, I don't know if you've got any. I think everybody's got
Um,
strong thoughts, and then but
well,
then it's getting to the point now where they're
I've
wasting
been
away.
I've been told we're not doing rugby politics on the pod. Uh, for the record, if Y11 fuck off out of Welsh rugby, I think that's going to be the best for all concerned.
Yeah,
And if they do
agreed.
end up buying us, then I think it's for the best if they sell us on, perhaps to Martin Ryan as quickly as possible. People who are owners of one club and then decide to shit on them and by taking over another club, I don't think you want people like that involved with sport. I think they should be
Yeah.
trading some other commodity, which has less emotional investment for people. Don't like them.
Fair, unequivocal. I only brought it up really so Tony could tell his joke about
Yeah.
Y11 pulling out.
I'm glad he got it in.
It
Yeah.
was purely because Lee asked me to do it as well. Otherwise, I would have left it on the shelf.
Producer Lee asking for porn star jokes on his YouTube videos. I'm not sure most would ask for them doing that. I do think though it is right that a lot of them been made about the EGM, whether it's linked to that. I think is a pure coincidence that basically 60 plus 30 days ends up the week after the EGM would have been. They obviously didn't know the EGM date at the time they started, and that essentially Swansea Council's legal action is to prevent the sale, and that if they were to try and complete the sale before that action was heard, then Swansea Council would just turn up at the High Court the next day and take out an emergency injunction to halt it until their actual legal action was heard. So for the WRU, it probably to delay it until that legal action is heard probably saves them a considerable amount on an already hefty legal bill of turning up for another day in court. And it could well be the case that the Y11 deal is ready to go, and as soon as the Swansea Council stuff is out the way, they just sign it and it goes. But hopefully, it's more maybe it turns out to be more the case that Y11 get bored and just disappear, which I think would
Yeah,
be.
and I suppose
Nothing.
the other thing to say is that when we talk about clarity about who's going to be coaching the team, who's going to be employed by the team, then getting these deals sorted sooner rather than later will give people that clarity.
Yeah, the next few weeks remains up in the air, and well, there's a month today, basically. I think the 30 days is up, and then there'll be the EGM and stuff. So another interesting months in a series of interesting months in Welsh rugby to come. Right, Rags Corner then. Cardiff back in SRC action on the weekend, starting the season running away at Pontypool, beat them 20-52. Tries from Craig Hudd got a brace, Matty Young got a brace, Johan Emmanuel got a brace, Ethan Lloyd and Oshan Darwin Lewis as well. Six conversions for Harry Wild. Stephen, you watched the highlights. Mentioned Wild earlier. Some of his passing was excellent. Matty Young also very good in that game.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't see the game live, but I watched the highlights back last night, and I started them thinking, oh, it's a nice play by Matty Young. Then the next bit, oh, a bit more nice play by Matty Young. Then, oh well, Matty Young, crikey. So yeah, Matty Young was all over it. And that's another player who is clearly banging pretty loud on the door for selection for the URC side. Um, you look at that the rag side that we sent up to Pontypool. I mean, there are some proper promising players in there. I mean, Wild, Matty Young, but also Oshin Darwin Lewis, Johan Emmanuel, who, I mean, I'm not sure what the situation is with him and Bath and whether his loan might end up turning into a permanent move, but I hope it does because he's
Didn't they
got
announce
something about him.
an extension for him?
Yeah, they announced him and Aaron Davis on new long-term deals about well during the end of the Six Nations, I
Oh,
think.
did they?
So
Oh, I missed
yeah,
that.
which
Oh,
they just sort of snuck him out. It was like in a group of like eight of senior academy players signing new deals. But
Yeah.
yeah, unless we get him back on loan consistently until his contract ends, I think it's probably unlikely he stays beyond this summer.
oh, that's a
Yeah, and he
shame because
looks
he
like a
looks like a
child, so
player,
he
and
looks
and
like
they're
a
still
child, so let's just keep him here.
and there's still Luca
Right.
Del Rua playing with the Rags as well. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's a talented side.
I thought it was particularly good to see De La Rua back's first time we've seen him since that really horrible
Yeah.
concussion incident at Ulster away. So yeah, it was good to see him back. And I think good of the club as well to sort of manage. Obviously, we'll come to the squad for the Sharks game a bit later. After a few injuries on Friday, it's looking a little bit light now. But previous years, I think we'd have seen Matty Young, Harry Wild, Lucas De La Rua all go out to South Africa, probably not play at all. And
Mm.
there's obviously something to be said for the experience of spending that with the first team. But I think also there's plenty to be said for just leave if they're not going to play at all, leave them get on with it with the Rags, get experience of actually playing, and also get the Rags in a spot where they can fly into the end of season playoffs with some real good momentum because we do keep shooting ourselves in the foot by killing their
Mhm.
momentum at the end of the season, and then we limp through the playoffs and lose in the semi-finals to somebody who we probably should have been beaten. So yeah, I think that's positive.
And I think Young went last year because I remember remarking on his South Africa haircut the week
He
I
did,
do
before or
yeah.
remember the
something.
haircut. Yeah,
Yes, he had
yeah,
a South Africa buzz cut, didn't he? I thought there was one moment in the highlights where I thought, "Oh, Tom Howe, great break! I can't wait to clip this up."
yeah.
Unfortunately, the break is so good; he gets so far ahead of his supporting backs that his pass then goes to ground, and Pontypool go at the other end and score instead. So, arguably, too good a break from him at that point. And then Craig Hudd's second try is worth watching as well, just because. I mean, we are well ahead at the time, and he's just sort of chucking out goose steps for a laugh and going around the outside of people on a wide arc from 13. So, yeah, the highlights on S4C Quarion's YouTube channel, worth having a click on for them. It takes the Rags to 6 wins in a row now in the SRC because obviously we don't accept the SRC Cup as a concept at all, so therefore we don't actively participate in it. So 6 wins for them going back to mid-December. They're now outright second. The run-in is incredible, really. So it starts with Llandovery, who are third this weekend. Then it's Newport, who are fourth. And then we finish with Swansea, who are fifth over the next 3 weeks. That's Llandovery game at Churchbank, 5 o'clock on Saturday, but it's on S4C's online channels if you want to watch that one. They won at Bridgend last week, but we battered them there last season, so hopefully a repeat of that one. And as I said, they're 6 points behind us at the moment, but Ebbw Vale lost to Newport, I want to say. I think they got thumped by Newport on the weekend, and that means that it's only 9 points all of a sudden now between us and Ebbw Vale in first. So I wonder if they might be looking nervously over their shoulder if we can put a few wins together and perhaps claim that first place trophy, which is now suddenly a thing in the year that we might not finish first, rather than
Ebbw have got Swansea away,
oh,
and
not
Swansea
an
have been
easy one.
no, they've been doing well so far this year. So I
Yeah.
think they're fifth. So
Yeah, they're in good run of form, Swansea, who seem to be replicating a little bit of the Rags thing going on with the Ospreys at the moment, where they seem to be the main beneficiary of Ospreys players. Cool. Right. At this point of the pod, then, if you're enjoying what you're listening to, please feel free to like and subscribe on whatever podcast platform you're on. Leave us a review as well. If you're watching us on YouTube, like the video, subscribe to the channel. Leave us a comment and we'll probably not reply to it, but we might read it at some point anyway. There's plenty of stuff on this rap channel and on the sister channel, the Global Gain Line as well, covering pretty much as many competitions and countries who play rugby as you can think of, and probably a few more on top of that as Lee expands his ever-growing podcast empire. We've also got the shop where you can pick up some Cardiff Central mugs and t-shirts as modeled by Tony there, for those of you watching on YouTube. And yeah, our shorts are still going out on YouTube as well. If you want to assume our takes even more so, then you can watch them as well. But please feel free to not highlight them when they prove to be inevitably untrue when the events that we're talking about take place. Okay, last part of the pod then. Sharks v Cardiff Friday, sorry, another 5 p.m. kickoff UK time on a Friday late afternoon. Another one on Premier Sports only, which I'm sure there's a point there to be made about why the hell aren't S4C showing games when Wales teams are playing in South Africa rather than showing games that are happening in South Wales at the time. But anyway, that's for another pod. The Sharks are currently 11th. They've got 5 wins, a draw, and 7 losses for their 13 games. They beat Munster last week, though, as we mentioned, 45-0. A pretty strong Munster team. I think they were only missing 2 or 3 of their sort of island squad regulars. That was on the back of them losing 2 South African derbies before that. So a continually weird team, the Sharks, who have the most Springboks out of everybody, but seem to underperform the most consistently. In terms of our record against them, it's quite positive. We did lose 22-42 at home last season in that game just before the Six Nations, where they rocked up with a load of South Africans, and we obviously were missing our Wales internationals in camp. But prior to that, it was 3 from 3 for us. We've never lost in Durban. That's the 14-36 win in May 2024, where we sort of snuck a win at the end of that season, where we'd almost beaten everybody but lost to everybody in the end. And there was the 0-35 game in November 2022 as well, which got the coach at the time sacked, I think, from the Sharks, didn't it? Which nobody quite saw come in. So obviously we'll hope to repeat those results this Friday. A question not just about this weekend, but about sort of the next 2 or 3 weekends that I asked on socials along with the question earlier was basically, would people rather beat the Sharks this week or target beating Benetton the following week away in the Challenge Cup round of 16? A couple of different opinions to be offered. Rob said Benetton is big for momentum, lose that and it could all unravel. Sid says he would definitely target the cup game for a win. But then Simon said he would go for the Sharks. Challenge Cup path is very tough. We've never qualified for the URC playoffs, and achieving that on our budget would be very creditable. Steve, I guess, does Van Zyl, what does he do the next few weeks if you were in his shoes? Would you contemplate not going all out in one of the Sharks or the Benetton game to maybe prioritize the league or the cup over each other? Or do you think the squad can be balanced effectively enough to target wins in both games?
I think if you have to choose one, you have to go for the league, because we're in such a good position at the moment. But it remains a real dogfight. You look at the league table; it's very, very tight. So I think if you have to prioritize one, it is the Sharks game. But having said that, if you look at the players who didn't go out to South Africa, so you got Alex Mann, Josh Adams. I think
Owen,
Azarati didn't go and he's fit again.
Azarati's there.
Owen as
Oh,
well.
he is there.
Yeah, he
Okay.
just didn't get selected on Friday. Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, those international players, plus those players in the rags who mentioned earlier, who I don't think I don't consider it a risk putting in someone like Matty Young or Harry Wild into the Benetton game because they're good enough. Um, and you combine that with players who haven't started so far in South Africa. I think you could go full strength in the Sharks game and still completely rotate things and put out a very competitive team in the Benetton game, which can get a result there. So I think that probably will be the approach. I think go strong for the Sharks game with what we've got out there, and then rotate it, but still be pretty strong for Benetton. And I wouldn't bet against us getting a result out there. I think the only tricky thing is, and again, we talked about this before the pod started, but the second row options, it's looking pretty thin at the moment. That's the that's going to be a big issue as we go into the last third of the season.
Tony, I think you were nodding when Steve said to go for the league. Is that where you would go as well?
Pretty much, yeah. I agree with what Steve said, which is terrible podcasting. Uh, I think you're right. We've got enough out there to go strong in South Africa, and then come back and bring in people like Bowen and Adams on the wing. Um, uh,
Steph Emmanuel as well. He can come
Steph
in.
Emmanuel hanging around, who we probably haven't seen as much as I thought we might have seen this year as well. And the only concern is second row. Um, you mentioned that, oh, we could probably talk about this later, but I think it's Evan Rees is the only other second row apart from McNally. I do wonder whether instead of starting him, you put Alan Lawrence in the second row, but who knows? We'll talk about that later, I would imagine.
Yeah, we'll get on to the team section in a minute. I think, Steve, almost to play devil's advocate for a minute, if you're going to back the league, would you, in Van Zil's position, for team just a little bit of team news now, Johan Mulder has flown out this week because Ali Davis is one of the players who got crocked last week, and we only took two nines initially. I'm not sure what's happened with Ian Davis at the other Bathlone. He wasn't involved with the Rags or the first last week, but so Mulder has flown out. So obviously we were in a position to fly some players out. Would you have been tempted to fly Adams out, fly Man out, maybe fly Bowen out as well, and go full against the Sharks, and then pick sort of a similar team to the one we took to Exeter, say, in the pool stage of the Challenge Cup to go to Benetton?
I think thinking about the players we probably do have out in South Africa, I don't think we need to strengthen the back row anymore. Because I mean we can change it around and bring in both them and Faletau, which I mean that those are two pretty good players to bring into the starting side. There are a few wing options already there, so I don't think there's a need to fly anybody else out, and we might benefit more, or probably will benefit more by letting those players who've played a lot of pretty big games recently, and I include the under 20s in that, to get a bit of an extended rest with the big games to come. So and as I say, that does hopefully enable us to go do a bit mix and match against Benetton rather than a complete second 15. Um, so yeah, I think we've probably got enough in South Africa to be very competitive against the Sharks. But yeah, I mean, I'm kind of repeating what I just said, but the second rows are the big unquantifiable.
Tony, the other devil's advocate angle, I suppose, of targeting the league more is if we pick arguably second rows aside, as we said, an even stronger team though. If you bring Botham and Faletau in, it probably makes it an even better 15. Azarate as well could come in. That probably on paper puts us slightly ahead of the team we picked last week. If we then get walloped by the Sharks for a second week in a row, Rob mentioned that losing to Benetton would unravel the season, but would losing heavily again this weekend with a strong team potentially derail us as well?
Um, no, because this side and squad have shown over the last couple of years that they have an ability to bounce back from defeats and still go into the next game as if that hadn't happened. They seem to have a really good goldfish memory. Um, so yeah, I like yeah. I don't think this game impacts the Benetton game massively.
Um, I suppose then, Steve, the sort of the backing up of the argument is how likely do you think the players are to see this as a chance to put things right from last week more than anything, not think about ahead? Is this just purely sort of a redemption from last week, or is it more of a last week didn't happen and we're starting again now with the running?
Yeah, I mean, I think we have to back ourselves against the Sharks. I mean, I think we can go into it confident because we've got a record of winning there. And I mean, I understand there's been another coaching change at the Sharks, and maybe that's changed their attitude. But I mean, we have seen from the Sharks in the past that, you don't know which Sharks team is going to turn up. So I think, yeah, the players will go into it positively, I'm sure. And as Tony says, they have a track record for bouncing back. And the thing is, I mean, even if we don't win, I think, 1 point, which we've taken from basically every other game this season, other than the Bulls game, that could prove incredibly useful at the end of the season in such a tight league. So yeah, I think the players will fancy it and will back themselves.
Give
You've
us
had a
the
week 10 days at altitude, right? Like
yeah.
that training is invaluable to then come back down to sea
Yeah.
level, and where we can utilize that little boost that we've hopefully got from it. So
Yeah, the air will suddenly be like soup on on Friday for them as the oxygen content goes
Azarati will
up.
be happy then.
Steve, give us your Met Office weather forecast for
Yeah.
Durban on Friday.
So Durban Friday night is going to be it's going to be hot. It's going to be 27 degrees Celsius, but feeling like 29. No rain and not much wind, but I've read elsewhere that the humidity is predicted to be at 90%. So when you say the air is going to be like soup, you're not kidding. Um, with which, I mean, like that's a factor which might play into our hands. I mean, particularly if we're going to play a kicking game again, and do it well. I mean, there's going to be drop balls on both sides, you would think.
Yeah, that's going to be a very sweaty ball, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I dread to think what color, if Azarati is selected, what color he's going to be after 10. I'm getting warm just
Maybe
thinking about
do they allow you to play with a bucket hat on?
it. That would be the new style of scrum cap
Yeah,
is the smart, very smart, we have to say, skull and crossbones bucket hats, which
those are very nice bucket hats.
the team have been modelling, presumably of next year's stash, which is somebody's taken a box out early to protect. Certainly, the likes of Azarati and Rory Jennings out there
They would
as
get
part of
those,
the
yeah.
change. Right, team selection then.
Before we
So,
move on to
oh,
that,
sorry, go on.
can I just point out? So we've got Necky this week to referee, and the two assistant referees we've got are Mornay Ferreira and Jonathan Lotterin,
Oh,
and we've got
the
we,
tinfoil hat is on for listeners.
and we've got Marius van der Vesthuizen as the TMO. We're the
Okay.
only game in South Africa with three assistant referees who are from the South African Rugby Union. Mornay Ferreira and Jonathan Lotterin are then also doing the Vodacom, doing the Bulls Munster game the next day, who have Holly Davidson and Sam Grove White. So I don't understand why we get a South African TMO against a Shark side that is trying to push for a top eight place, whereas the Bulls, who are safely in the top eight, get a South African sorry, a Scottish TMO. And then if you look at the Lions and Dragons game, they've got an Irish referee, two different South African touch judges, and an Irish TMO. And then for the last game is the Stormers Edinburgh is Owen Cross, who we had last week, Griffin Colby, Sean Muller, two different South African assistant referees, and Necky is the TMO for the Stormers Edinburgh game. So why can't we have Cross as the TMO? Why have we got to have a South African as a TMO for the only South African team who are trying to chase down the top eight place, whereas the others are happily in the top eight and they all get neutral TMOs?
Well, I mean, you've planted the seed, Tony, and if we get some dodgy calls again on Friday, I'm going to be right on that.
Let me just, I'm just going to start my drafts now, to be honest.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I mean, if there's anything to clip up, it's this.
Yeah, I have to say, like, on a general level, that is weird. Like, why they couldn't have got us a non-South African TMO when there's plenty out there, especially if they're flying two of them out to another game the day after. Surely they could have sent us like Sam Grove White and then put him on the same flight to go to that other
Yeah,
game the next day. I don't really understand that.
he's 6 out. This is 6 hours drive up the road, so you presume they're flying. So yeah, they just get them all on the.
Yeah.
It's just absolutely strange unless you factor in the Sharks are chasing eighth place, and we are a direct rival for that because of the way our season ends.
Hmm. Sure. Also, just you just don't want to see Marius van der Westhuizen on your game either,
No,
because
no,
he
you
is
don't.
a bit of a clown. Right, team selection then. Thanks for your tinfoil hat, Tony. Glad to see that's back. Um, team
I haven't had
selection.
any for a few weeks,
No, it's been good.
so
It's got to shift that merchandise. Um, team selection, three injuries from last week, as I mentioned. So George Knott went off with some sort of hip issue. Been no sign of him in training this week. Aled Davis looks like he pinged a hammy. Obviously, he's not going to be playing because they flown Mulder out. And then Jacob Beetham with what transpired to be a head injury assessment, which he failed and hasn't been involved in training this week at all either, from what I've seen. So we can assume that he's not going to be back for this game. Obviously, as mentioned, though, in is Mulder, who's gone out there. He landed on Sunday, so he should be ready to go by Friday after the birth of his child. I bet he was like chuffed with that call of, oh, 1 week of poor sleep, and then, oh, do you want to come out to South Africa? Oh, go on then. Yeah, I'll survive, I'm sure. We shall get into the front row team selection then. Steve, same, was it 10 players as last week? Got Loosehead, you got Barrett, Southworth, and Domachowski. Hooker, we got Belcher and Hughes, and then tight head, Azarati, Sebastian, and Wainwright. What's your starting three and bench three out of them?
I'd be tempted to go same again. The only thing that might change my mind is if the reason Azarati didn't play last week was because he's still carrying an injury and maybe it's improved by now. But unless that's the case, I would just go same again. I mean, the front row, both front rows had a difficult time last week, and I'm sure they want to put that right. So I would say, yeah, just go again.
I'd be tempted to start Dav Hughes. Would be the only change I would make, just because I think he's a bit more dynamic. And then you can bring Belcher on to try and close the game out. But it would be a toss up, and I wouldn't argue either way really. But in my head, I'm starting to get to the point where I think Dav Hughes is the number one, number two.
Ooh, that's a big call.
That is a big call. When you say dynamic, as in, what
He's
in what
better
sense?
around the park than Belcher for me, and I'm getting a couple of confused looking faces back at me, but it just feels like he adds more around the pitch than I get from Belcher. And maybe that's because he's a bit taller and a bit bigger than Belcher, and I notice him more. But his darts are good. He scrimmages well. Belcher's obviously got the plus points in the leadership department, but there's just something about Dav Hughes I like. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I he's definitely more physical. He's just a bigger bloke
Yeah.
than Belcher, I
Yeah.
suppose, isn't it? Like Belcher's strong, but Hughes is just a naturally bigger bloke, and I think you do see that a little bit more at scrum time as well, and in the tight. But yeah, I feel like you might be in the minority of people who would describe him as more dynamic than Belcher. I think Belcher is,
Maybe
this,
dynamic's the wrong word.
yeah, Belcher's deceptively quick, and
Physical is probably what I'm after.
yeah,
When
physical would be
whenever
powerful.
Belcher gets a bit of space to run in, which is obviously rare because he's a hooker, he looks very quick and he makes good use of that space. And I think he's deceptive and he's a difficult player to bring down. And I'm trying to sort of second guess what type of game it's going to be on Friday. And
Yeah.
if it
Yeah.
turns out to be quite a loose game with like lots of drop balls and the ball going everywhere, it might be useful to have you know it might be useful to have Belcher in those circumstances, just that much more of a ball player. Plus, he's the captain, he's a leader, and this could end up being a big game for us.
I'm happy to be swayed either way, and I will go with Belcher.
I think you're right in that it's
Just
a
wanted to check
toss-up.
it out.
I think there's a. I mean, when Evan Lloyd's fit, I think there's a real like three-way fight
Mm.
over that jersey.
Yeah, I'm deciding vote for Belcher on that one. But yeah, like Hughes is underrated by us. I do think, like generally, we do quite often when it's like the three of them are fit, Belcher, Lloyd, and Hughes. We do just automatically discount Hughes, but he's probably more closer to the conversation than we sometimes make him out to be. Second row then obviously has to be McNally and Thornton to start because they are the only second rows available. And then back row, Tony, you've got Botham, Lawrence, Thomas, Falatau, Basham, and Reese obviously is out there. He is a back rower by trade. He has played a little bit in the second row for the Rags, which is why we think he is probably the candidate to be the second row cover there. But just sticking with back row as a primary focus now, what would be your starting three there?
Lawrence, Basham, and Falatau. I think these are the sort of games that we brought Basham in to try and give us that bit more physical edge. It takes a bit more to having Lawrence and Basham in the side takes a little bit of pressure from a ball carrying perspective off Falatau, especially if we've got McNally and Thornton, which Thornton's not the greatest ball carrier. So again, that just gives you a little bit of extra ball carrying, I think.
I suppose I would come back like not to say it's wrong. That's a good back row. Dan Thomas, excellent though. Again last week has been very
Totally.
good. Was he in the conversation there?
Yeah, it's it was purely because of the second row and wanting to protect Falatau a little bit of I like watching Basham run. He's an angry man at times. Um, you can't drop Lawrence because I just think he's so good. Um, and then you've got to make space for Falatau. So Dan Thomas isn't being dropped for Basham; he's being dropped for Falatau, which I feel is more an acceptable thing than than being just discarded because of Basham. So
And then my other question would be Botham question mark?
Yeah,
I forgot about both of them. I mean, the other option is that you put you have Basham 6, Botham 7, Falatau 8, which is a well balanced one and does carry well again. And then you use Lawrence off the bench as second row cover because he's played that when he was much younger. I think he played against Uruguay for Cardiff again in second row
I
and he
think he
came through
played
as a
against
second row.
Toulouse as a second row. I
Yeah,
I think
vaguely remember.
both of those games, I think he might have ended
Yeah.
up in the second row. He did. He has also
I just like bringing up the Uruguay game.
he took a few under 20s caps a second row,
Yeah.
I think, as well back in the day. Yeah, I feel like both and Basham Falatau is probably more along the lines of what I was thinking as well. And then you've got probably Lawrence and Thomas on the bench then to with like I think Reese, whilst he is the second row guy potentially, like we would only have turned to him in an emergency there.
Mm,
I don't think we'd have actively
mm,
chosen to bring him on. Whereas there might be a scenario in the last 20 minutes where we feel like the set piece isn't such an important part of the game at that point, and they do just bring Lawrence on for a McNally or a Thornton and sort of throw caution to the wind a bit and bring on all the ball carriers at once. Is that sort of fair?
We went 6-2 last week, which is surprising, didn't we? Normally Van Ziel's very 5-3. So do you even have Reese on the bench if you've got Lawrence and that, especially if it's going to be a bit soupy, as Steve was saying earlier?
So are you saying do go 6-2 or
I know I'd say go 5-3.
so Lawrence and Thomas as your 19 and
Yeah,
20 then? Steve, I don't know if
yeah.
you've got any strong thoughts on that.
I think in the back row, definitely Botham and Faletau, and for the other one, it's probably a toss-up between Basham and Dan Thomas. I mean, I really like Basham as well. Part of me thinks, but because Dan Thomas was so good in the last game, you sort of go with the momentum and keep him in there. But I mean, I wouldn't have an issue with either Basham or Thomas starting. Um, and yeah, it's difficult to know about whether to go with the 6-2 or a 5-3 because again, trying to sort of second guess what type of game it's going to be. Possibly if we've got both Reece and Lawrence on the bench, that somehow counteracts the fact that we haven't really got a second row cover. Possibly. But then, yeah. I
I,
can't decide whether it's best to go with 6-2 or 5-3. I possibly leaning towards 6-2.
let's
And
let's go through.
Belcher covers six as well. So or
Okay,
Dan
yeah.
Hughes covers six. One of them two. So it's a secret 6-3.
Let's go through the backs and then we'll have a look, see what backs coverage we think we might need
Yeah,
or otherwise, and decide from there as well. So,
all of it.
Steve, halfback combination. Nine is probably the major question. We've mentioned Bevan. I thought look all right actually off the bench in his hour or so, but Mulder has gone out there now. Are you tempted to chuck Mulder straight in, or did Bevan do enough to take the nine jersey?
I think because Bevan had a strong showing, I would keep him in there. I would say, I would say, we're going to back you now. You've been starved of starts. Use your opportunity, and definitely with Sheedy. And again, thinking about the bench, I really like. I mean, I like Mulder starting, but I also like seeing him coming off the bench and picking up the
Mm.
pace of the game.
Yeah, that was my thought as well. I think Mulder is a perfect last 20-25 minute
Yeah,
South Africa away replacement.
particularly if like we've got three tries and we're looking for a fourth.
Yeah,
I mean, I'm not saying we necessarily lead in the game, but it might be one of those games where
yeah.
there's a shit ton of points on both sides.
Also, the Sharks is the only team you don't have to invoke the Mulvihill rule for Johan Mulder for,
Okay.
because he played for the Bulls and he played for the Lions, so he can start on the bench.
I did double check where he was from in case there was a subsection of the Marvel rule that says you play against your hometown or something as
I
well.
didn't look at that.
I also like Bevan starting because what I thought was
Yeah.
what was helpful when he came on last week, which I think Davis struggled with a bit, is that where the South Africans are obviously big and physical, their back rowers, the breakdown can be a little bit messy, the ball screwing out, and Bevan is just better, I think, at cleaning that up because he's a bit bigger and he doesn't take people coming over the ruck very kindly. He sort of just gets people out of the way. He's quite good at whipping the ball away quite quickly and being a bit physical in there. Whereas I thought Davis, we struggled a little bit with Davis. Just he is just that half a second more ponderous at times where he thinks about what he wants to do, and that cost us on occasion on Friday. Tony centres then, if we're going relatively strong, I assume Thomas and Millard, unless
Yeah,
you've got
they
any
pick
strong,
themselves.
yeah. And then, well, Tony, you were stick with the back three then, as that wasn't really a selection question. So you got Grady, uh, obviously no Jacob Beetham this week, so I've got winger options. There's Grady, Stevens as your two out and out guys. And then there's the option to put Johan Lloyd on the wing, as we've seen before. Elijah Evans is also out there as well, who can play off the wing. I don't know. Is it as simple as Grady Stevens, or is there a chat that Lloyd is maybe almost a sort of direct replacement for Beetham as a kind of not natural winger, a bit more of a ball player type thing?
Um, I was sort of thinking Grady Stevens Lloyd.
Lloyd
So
15.
no win it, no win it.
Hmm.
Um, Not for any other reason than I want his kicking. I think he if they're going to kick a lot as well, then from a broken field perspective, I want to see what Lloyd can do. I think it also gives us that extra ball player where you can move around Thomas, Sheedy, and him a little bit, where they can all come in at first receiver a little bit and go from there. It just allows us to be a bit more dangerous. Obviously, right at the end of the season is where we should be trialing these things. Um, just go full new system, nuclear, go now. But again, I think yeah, I just want to get Lloyd in that team.
Fair shout. I don't have any strong objections to that. Steve, I don't know if you had any strong
Yeah,
backs on that.
I'd quite like to see Lloyd get a start. It depends whether whether he
Yeah.
goes at wing or fullback. So I'd go along with Tony's selection. I mean, part of me would quite like to see Elijah Evans, but then maybe he's better coming off the bench if he does play.
I was thinking Evans on the bench because he covers 13 as well.
Yeah,
So then you've got Grady and Evans covering 13. You've got Lloyd and Thomas covering 10. You've got Mulder covers 9 and Bevan covers wing. Um, it just allows a little bit of flexibility if things start to go badly injury
yeah,
wise.
and Lloyd can also cover 12, can't he?
Yeah,
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 I also quite like it because I would like to see Stevens get a run out as well
yeah.
on Friday. I think he's always looked good when he's played for us, and we haven't seen too much of him post injury, so it'd be good for him to get some minutes and on
And
a flat fast track in South Africa. I think that'll benefit his skill set quite a lot as well. So if Evans on the bench, then are we sticking 5-3 and then go in? Well, presumably Evans win it would be your two outside back options on the bench then, or 6-2 with Reese and then just Mulder and Evans as your two outside backs. And if anyone's got any,
I I do one it like you said earlier, if Reese is just there break glass in case of emergency, is there any point? It's good for him to be in and around the squad, but he can do the same thing from a travelling reserve perspective and get that experience. But you want people on your bench that you can bring on when the chips are down and when games are tight. And if you're not going to do that, then then don't put them on the bench. It would be my only um difficulty in having him on the bench.
yeah, I mean, I struggle to find an argument to disagree with that, to be honest. And I do think that is that. I think we saw that with when he was on the bench the other week as well. That there was no desire to bring Reece on there. He didn't
Yeah,
even look like he was sort of warming up at all. It was very much like if somebody gets injured, you're on. Otherwise, keep wrapped up and and you would think that if they're not going to bring him on at home against it was Leinster, wasn't it? If they're not going to bring him on against Leinster at home in a Six Nations period match, then they're probably not going to bring him on away at the Sharks in a full on match in Durban. So. Um, yeah. Steve, have you got anything? Any-
um, I think I'm going to disagree partially because I've got a point and partially because it helps the podcast. Um, I think because you've got so many kind of utility type players starting the game, it does give you the opportunity to go with a 6-2 with Elijah Evans coming able to come on and cover a couple of different positions. And I feel like if Evan Reese is, I think he's a year out of the under 20s group.
Yeah.
Um, and I feel like if you're going to take him out to South Africa, but you don't want to play him, then maybe you shouldn't have taken him in the first place.
yeah, yeah.
So I would I would say go with the 6-2 with both Lawrence and Reese covering the whole back five, and then I guess either Basham or Thomas, depending on. Did we say we were starting Basham?
Yeah, I put Basham
Yeah,
in.
and then Thomas covering seven.
Well, I think my deciding vote, but two good. I don't really think there's a bad option there. I think I'm going to
Yeah.
stick with 5-3 as my deciding vote. But that's mainly just because I've got a bad feeling about backs injuries for some reason on Friday, and I think if we end up going too bad on injuries early, then we could end up with Evans coming on
Picking on
early, and
vibes.
yeah,
Yeah.
just I'm looking at some of our back three players, and I'm thinking there's some injuries to be had there. Stevens back from injury, Grady gets injured quite a lot, and Thomas just back from a Wales squad as well. So we'll stick with that. But I don't think there is a too bad option there. As we've said, the difficulty is sort of trying to predict how this game is going to go as
Yeah.
well on Friday. Because the other aspect of Reece on the bench could be that if it's all over by 60 minutes, then you may as well bring him on anyway. It doesn't
Exactly.
really
Yeah.
make a difference. So yeah, that's a slightly negative viewpoint to go with. But it
Oh,
also
I thought you meant because we were so far ahead.
no, well, yeah. That is what I meant. Yeah. Right. So the 1 to 23 that I've recorded there, then we got Barrett, Belcher, Sebastian, McNally, Thornton, Botham, Basham, Faletau, Bevan, Sheedy, Stevens, Ben Thomas, Millard, Grady, Lloyd, Hugh Southworth, then Azarati if he is actually fit, otherwise Wainwright, Lawrence, Thomas, Mulder, Evans, Winnett. It's I think it's a probably a slightly stronger 15 than we fielded last Friday with that back row, but a little bit more
Nice
makeshift
looking
around the
back row,
bench.
isn't it?
Yeah,
Yeah,
it is, and as
if
we
nothing
said, is
else.
it's a team that can at least put in an improved performance. I think
Yeah.
it's probably fair to say. Any more about the game on Friday or any other business generally?
No, that's looking really good, isn't it? I think that it's a team that can score tries as well, isn't it?
Yeah,
And
and
if we get a try bonus out of this, then I call that a win.
Yeah.
Hopefully
good
more, but I call that a win.
good stuff. Right, I shall call it there for this week. Then, Steve, thank you very much for joining me.
Thank you.
Cheers, Tony.
Ta-da!
We'll be back next week looking back on that Sharks game and we'll switch into Challenge Cup mode. But until then, thank you very much for listening and goodbye.